Good day, everyone. Assuming that you're done with your research questions, your statement of the problem, this is the next part that you must do, as a research beginner, the research framework. The research this framework is actually the visual plan of your research process. Okay. Now, defining the research framework, this is illustrate the structure or blueprint of the research plan and helps you as a researcher formulate irrelevant research questions. So, as I've said, that the research framework is the visual plan. Okay? It could be a framework, could be a flow chart, a diagram with textual explanation about the flow of your study. No? Now, specifically, this is what we call a conceptual framework. This refers to the actual ideas, the actual beliefs, and a tentative theories that specifically support your study. It is primarily a conception or a model of what is out there that the researcher plans to study. So, like the visual the visual representation on the screen, because you can see, the three rectangular boxes. The part of these boxes are the variables, specifically independent variable, dependent variable, and moderator variable. Now, in the independent variable, I know you guys are familiar with these variables. The hours of study, okay, which is the presumed presumed cost of this model. On the other hand, the dependent variable, which is the exam score. Technically, it is the presumed cost of and the presumed effect, should I say, from the independent variable, which is the hours of study. Okay. Now you can see the rectangular box below, which is the moderator variable. Later we'll define the definition of that specific variable. Now, the moderator variable, however, is the intelligent quotient. So I'd like you to think of the relation of these rectangular boxes to each other. Okay? Pay attention to the arrow, where the arrow leads. Okay, look at the hours of study directing to the exam score. Okay, and as you can see, the table below, the moderator variable, which is the IQ, going up, intervening the independent variable and the dependent variable. It directly points to the arrow above. Okay, so we'll modify that part by part later on. Okay, so again, just always remember that the conceptual framework is the visual representation of your research process. Since you've done with your research questions, so pay attention to the variables indicated in your research questions in order for you to come up with a conceptual framework. Now let's just have a quick comparison between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. Well, I know some of you were having we're having difficulty to understand the difference between the theoretical framework and conceptual framework. Just always remember, the theoretical framework, this framework coming from the studies that have been conducted in the past. Okay, the conceptual framework it focuses on your study. Okay, your proposed framework based on your study. Okay, now when it comes to the content of discussion, the theoretical framework focuses on a specific theory that is used already in the field. No, pwede itong maging mga theory na nagamit na in the past studies. Okay? On the other hand, the conceptual framework focus on concepts related to your study. Okay? Ito yung mismong process ng research mo. Okay? When it comes to the range, the theoretical framework is broader in sense and it is applicable in different studies. Okay? These are the theories that have been verified, studies that have been of course proven. Okay, that which the other researchers could apply the idea or the ideas that have been stipulated. Okay, now the conceptual framework, on the other hand, when it comes to range, it is narrower, it is focused, again, based on your study, directly related to your specific study. Okay? When it comes to the theories presented, it presents the theoretical framework presents one or more theory at a time and is specifically related to the current study. Okay? So again, ito nga po no yung mga theory na nagamit na over time that somehow related to your topic. Okay? The conceptual framework, on the other hand, it may synthesize one or more theories or concept related to your current study. Na ikaw mismo yung nag-formulate nung konsepto na yon. Kayong mga researchers mismo ang nag-formulate ng concept na yon based on your research questions. Yung mga variables na naka-indicate doon sa ninyong research questions. Okay? Now, when it comes to the time frame, the theoretical framework, usually a theory is established before the study. Okay? So, again, common naman yung definition no, ng theoretical framework that ito po, no, ito yung mga teorya na established na, no, na-prove na po yan. On the other hand, the conceptual framework, it is a working concept during the time of your study. Okay? So, I'll show you the specific example of conceptual framework. Well, I know you guys are familiar with blueprint, diba? So, when you're about to build a project, there should have a specific plan on when the project would start. Okay? And the expected outcome of your project. Diba? Meron kayong mismong plano. Okay? Same as true when building a house. Diba? Hindi ka naman pwedeng basta build ng isang bahay if there's no specific plan. No? It calls it as blueprint. Diba? Nandun yung tamang measure, ano yung sukat, no? And ano yung design, ano yung expected outcome nung mismong bahay na gagawin. Okay? So, all of the things were there. Okay? So, same as true in research. Ito yung visual representation of your research process that is specifically based on your research questions. Okay? look at this. No, you can use concept mapping. A concept map is actually a visual representation of information that helps show the relationship between different ideas. No, concept maps begin with the main topic, which usually placed on the center, okay, of the framework, which branch out into different subtopics, which reflecting the connection to the main topic. And this is what we call the elements of the study. It can also provide to organize the proposed ideas or new ideas. So, when you craft your conceptual framework, you can use different different charts or concept mapping that is related to your topic. Okay? So, it could be graphic organizers, tables, flowcharts, Venn diagrams, timelines, or T-charts, the concept map as your conceptual framework. Again, the sole purpose of having the conceptual framework para po ma-organize ninyo yung ideas visually and makita yung connection ng mga variables ninyo that are being stipulated in your research questions. Okay? So, as a beginner, you can start with a broad topic, then formulate a sub-topics that will get more and more specific, which also helps you in formulating a specific topic from the general or main idea with significant connections. You know, the logical reason of having graphic organizers, tables, and flowcharts, the Venn diagrams, to visually see, of course, to visually identify the connections of the variables. As simple as that, no? Kaya tayo gumagawa ng mga charts na yan and organizers para makita natin yung connections ng mga ideas, concepts, or variables. Okay? Now, consider the different types of variables, which I know you guys are familiar with the 5 different variables, specifically, or most especially, the independent variable and the dependent variable. So this is just a recall that when we say independent variable, it is the presumed cause. Ito yung nagiging sanhi. Okay? Ito yung sanhi of the research problem. So it is the reason for any change. Now, if there are changes in the independent variable, you expect that there would have changes to the next variable. It could be the dependent variable, of course, and the mediating, the moderating, or in the intervening variables. Okay, so it can be purposely manipulated by the researcher, of course, depending on the focus of the study. As you can see, from the previous presentation, nakita ninyo yung hours of study, yung tagal ng pag-aaral, at yung magiging score naman niya. So from that, makita natin yung independent variable, which is the hours study spent by the student, and the possible high score that the student would get, di ba? So kita niyo doon yung sanhi, no, nung gaano katagal, baka merong effect, no, yung the time spent ng pag-review at doon sa magiging score, no, ng isang student. Okay? So, moreover, it refers to the variable that is stable and unaffected by the other variables you are trying to measure. Kaya nakita natin dyan, a researcher can manipulate purposely the independent variable. Okay? Next is the dependent variable. This is actually the presumed effect, okay? The presumed effect of the research problem. So, from the example earlier, kita ninyo yung possible high score na makuha ng estudyante. Okay? Base doon sa tagal ng kanyang pag-review. Okay? So, the score of the student is actually the presumed effect. Okay? Now, it is altered as a result of experimental manipulation of the independent variable or variables. So it is also called, on the other hand, as the criterion, the effect, the response, or outcome variable, which captures the interest of the researcher and requires analysis, the interpretation, and implication of the presumed cause plus the presumed effect. Okay? Now, the interpretation and implication would be found in the findings of your study. That after conducting the survey, analyzing the gathered data, what these findings try to imply. Okay. Now the variable depends on other factors that are measured and are affected or influenced by the independent variable. Okay. So lagi namang magkasama yung IV and DV na yan. The IV is the independent variable and the effect, no, the dependent variable. Ito yung affecting variable caused by the independent variable. Okay? Now, let me add this. The moderating variable. Nakita ninyo sa example kanina that the rectangular box is the intelligent quotient. Okay? So, nandun yung pagre-review, yung time spent ng pag-review. At ano kaya ang maging effect niyan doon sa magiging score ng estudyante? But, the moderating variable there, of course, is the intelligent quotient, which is somehow related or correlated to the both, no? To the time spent when reviewing and the scores. Kahit gaano katagal naman yung pagre-review mo, no? If the intelligent quotient is quite low, so may effect din yan doon sa magiging score. Okay? So kung ang intelligent quotient ng isang estudyante is quite high at mas mahaba pa yung oras na na-spent niya, so sa pagre-review, possible that the score of the students would baka mag-perfect pa, no? Or would be very high. Okay? So, may kinalaman din, no, yung intelligent quotient somehow doon sa dependent variable, which is the score that the students would get. Okay? So, the moderating variable influences the independent variable influences the direction and the strength of the connection between independent variable and the dependent variable. Now, the independent variable interacts with the moderator variable. Nakita niyo kanina, no, yung arrow ay directly point doon sa arrow ng independent variable going to the dependent variable. Okay? So, which is stronger, or it could be stronger or weaker. So, it alters the effect that an independent variable has on a dependent variable based on its value. So, the moderator influences the effective component of the cause and effect relationship. Moderating siya. Okay? Meron siyang effect doon sa independent at dependent variable. And this is what we call interaction effect. Okay? Now, the mediating variable or the intervening variable, it is the element that exists between the independent to the dependent variable. Okay? It is a mediator variable. It is an integral part of the cause and effect relationship and helps us to understand the effects of the independent variable on the dependent variable. So it is the a variable that describes the effect and influence of the relationship between the variables and what is controlling that relationship. Okay, so this is also called as correlated or mediator variables. Now, in many studies, especially in the social science and academic related um, study, ang mediating variable, well, yan ay applicable no kapag ang study mo ay experimental. Okay? So, it is widely used sa mga sa science and technology no na field kasi kailangan din maintindihan nila yung effect ng independent variable sa dependent variable. Okay? Usually kasi sa mga social science, lalo na kapag not purely experimental, kung yan ay descriptive, so hindi na natin ginagamitan ng wala nang mediating variable. Now, if the study ay experimental and correlational, dyan po lumalabas no, yung mediating variable kasi kailangan nilang malaman at maintindihan kung ano ang kung bakit yung effect ng independent variable doon sa dependent variable. Okay? So, paano nila yan malalaman? By simply knowing the description of the effect or the influence, okay, of the independent variable. Okay? Now, the control variable. Okay? The control variable is a special type of independent variable that can influence also influence the dependent variable, like what I explained to you about the from the previous session, the role of control variable. Okay, so it takes an active role in quantitative studies. Statistical procedures are used to control this variable. There would have a point of comparison. There should have an experimental process when knowing the control variable. Dalawa dapat yan, no? Meron kang point of comparison or standard of comparison to know the control variable. Okay, para in order for the researcher to see the characteristics of two or more variables, kailangan meron siyang control variable. Ito yung standard, no, of the standard reference or point of reference. Okay? Well, ito naman ay applicable actually sa science and technology. Okay? But if your studies, again, purely descriptive, yan, hindi na natin sinasama ang control variable. Okay? Usually, IV and DV po yan. Well, it depends on the objectives that the researchers would like to explore. Okay? Now, commonly, kapag nagsisimula pa lang kayo sa research ninyo, you can apply the IPO. But, well, for me, no, especially sa college, hindi ko na pinapa-apply itong process na to. I want the students to craft their own conceptual framework. Okay, pero when you're just starting starting to understand the process of your research or study, okay, pwede nyo namang i-apply itong model na ito, no? The input, process, and output. Tatlo lang po yan. There should have a rectangular box vertically for the input, and then plus a box for the process, and another box for the output. Okay? So, it is a functional model which is necessary to solve the identified problem. So again, the input is usually the independent variable of the study. Take note on that. These are the variables that are presented in your research problems, okay, or research problem, should I say. So the process is the intervention or solution consisting of the instruments and analysis used to acquire the result. Now, the output is actually the findings or outcome of the interventions being made to solve the identified problem. Now, look at the IV-DV model. Okay, so the independent variable there, basically the hours of study. Okay. Now, the dependent variable there is the academic performance. Look at the arrow. Okay, so yung arrow is leading to the dependent variable. So, ang kiniklaim dito sa framework na to ay there would have a relation or effect of between basically the hours of study to the academic performance. Okay? So, that's the schematic diagram of the independent and dependent variables of the study. Ganun lang siya, kasimple or ka-basic. So, as you can see there, this framework shows the independent and dependent variables of the study, which is the presume that the more number of hours a student prepares for the exam, the higher would be the expected academic performance. Okay? Plus, ito naman yung IPO. Okay? The IPO model. So, doon sa input, doon po sa input, social demographic profile, may kinalaman itong mga demographic profile nito. Example, the age, the sex, and the marital status. Okay? At plus another variable, which is food safety profile. Ano yung knowledge ng mga respondents at ng attitude and then ng practices. Okay? Now, question, sir, ano ba, kailangan ba yung social demographic profile ay isama namin? Hindi naman. Okay? Kasi, well, commonly sa mga research studies in the past, so nandun yung demographic profile ng mga respondents. Kung wala namang kinalaman yung demographic profile doon sa research objectives ninyo, hindi natin siya kailangan ilagay. Okay? So, but again, kung meron namang kinalaman at meron kayo nabasa ng mga review of related literature na may kinalaman ang edad, no, at kasarian at yung status ng isang tao doon sa mga variables na gusto ninyong ma-investigate, pwede naman natin ilagay. But not all the time. Okay? So, hindi po lagi. Basta lang natin ipipilit na kailangan ilagay ang demographic profile. Unless kung merong mga magsusupport dito na RRL. Okay? Or mga studies beforehand. Now, the process. Okay? The process of the study. Ito, generic naman ito. Siyempre, may kinalaman yung profiling kasi kukunin mo yung social demographic profile ng mga respondents mo. So, after getting the profile of your respondents, then magpo-formulate ka ngayon ng questionnaire mo. Okay? Specifically, a survey questionnaire kung yan naman ay quantitative. Okay? And then, the data analysis. Okay? So, assuming natapos ka na mag-conduct ng survey, then the next step that the researcher will do, i-analyze niya yung mga nag-gather na data. Okay? Then, the output would be your proposed solution. Okay? On this case, I propose intervention program. Okay? Doon sa yung sa research problem mo. Like what I told you, dapat ang last question natin ay a question that is situation producing. Okay? Yung situation producing, ito yung nagtatanong kung anong model, anong framework, or anong plan, a concrete plan, like intervention program, action plan na pwede ninyong ma-propose to address the problems in your study. Okay? So, yan. Simple lang yung kanyang presentation kapag IPO. 3 boxes lang yan. Kahit naman hindi diamond shape, no? Okay lang din naman kung yan ay vertical na box. I mean, rectangular siya. So, kita ninyo yung arrow. So, from the input, pointing the process, and then the process pointing the box under output. So, ganun lang siya. Okay? Doon siya natatapos. Doon sa project or action plan or solution no na inyong study. Okay? So, I want you guys to practice crafting your conceptual framework based on your research questions. Okay? Sa ngayon, since nagsisimula pa lang kayo, I want you guys to start with the IPO model. Okay? Now, after doing this, check natin yan. Kapag familiar na kayo sa variables ng study ninyo, at alam nyo na yung connection ng mga variables na yan, okay? Then, gagawa na kayo ng mismong conceptual framework ninyo na hindi IPO model. Okay? So, gagawa kayo ng sarili ninyong, concept based on your research questions. Okay? So, I hope that your knowledge about conceptual framework have been at least na level up, no, para mas madali na lang sa inyo makapag-come up, no, ng conceptual framework.